In a move that has sent ripples across the globe, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, has made a truly historic decision. At a crucial summit held in The Hague on June 25, 2025, member nations agreed to a new, ambitious defense spending target. They have committed to spending a massive 5% of their gross domestic product on defense by the year 2035. This is a dramatic escalation from the previous 2% target, which was itself a challenge for many members to meet. NATO's own leader, Secretary-General Mark Rutte, didn't mince his words, calling this a quantum leap for the alliance's collective security. It signals a fundamental shift in how NATO views the world and its own role within it. But what does this 5% figure actually mean in practice? It's not just about buying more tanks and planes. The plan cleverly breaks down the spending into two distinct categories, providing a broader definition of security. The larger portion, 3.5% of GDP, is earmarked for what is called core or pure defense. This is the money that will go directly towards funding the military itself, covering everything from soldiers' salaries and training to purchasing advanced hardware like fighter jets, warships, and sophisticated missile systems. This is the sharp end of the spear, designed to ensure NATO forces are ready for direct conflict. The remaining 1.5% of GDP is allocated to a wider range of security-related activities. This is a modern approach, acknowledging that today's threats are not just on the battlefield. This portion will fund crucial areas like strengthening a nation's civil preparedness, which means ensuring society can function during a crisis. It also includes bolstering cybersecurity to defend against digital attacks, investing in technological innovation for the military, and expanding the defense industrial base. The idea is to build national resilience from the ground up, making the entire country, not just its army, a harder target for any adversary. This new target represents an astronomical increase in financial commitment. To put it into perspective, NATO's total military spending in 2024 already stood at an incredible $1.5 trillion, which was more than half of all military spending on the entire planet. To reach the new 5% goal, experts estimate that the alliance will need to find an additional $1.9 trillion every single year. This isn't just a small adjustment, it is a complete reordering of national priorities for the 32 member states. The decision reflects a stark new reality, one where peace in Europe can no longer be taken for granted and requires a level of investment not seen in generations. So why has NATO made such a drastic change now? The primary driver is undeniably the heightened threat from Russia. The full-scale invasion and ongoing war in Ukraine have shattered the post-Cold War sense of security in Europe. Russia's aggressive actions and willingness to use military force to redraw borders have convinced NATO leaders that a much stronger deterrent is absolutely necessary. The brief, 427-word communiqué from the Hague Summit was unusually direct, focusing almost exclusively on Russia as the main threat. This intense focus shows just how seriously the alliance is taking the challenge from Moscow, viewing it as a direct and existential danger to its members. Another major factor has been the long-standing and often forceful pressure from the United States. For years, American presidents have pushed their European allies to contribute more to their own defense, a concept often referred to as burden sharing. This pressure reached a new level under President Donald Trump, who has been vocal in his demands for allies to meet their spending obligations. The 5% target can be seen as a direct response to this pressure, a way for European nations to demonstrate their commitment and ensure the US remains anchored to European security. With America signaling a potential pivot towards the Indo-Pacific, this move is also a pragmatic step towards greater self-reliance. The new spending target also serves as a way to formalize and sustain the massive support being provided to Ukraine. Under the new rules, contributions made by member countries to help Ukraine defend itself will count towards their 5% goal. This is a significant detail, as it provides a clear financial incentive for nations to continue supplying Kyiv with military and financial aid. It essentially integrates support for Ukraine into the core mission of NATO's collective defense strategy. However, this has also drawn some criticism, with some analysts worrying that it could dilute the focus on building up NATO's own direct military capabilities for its own defense. While Russia is the clear and present danger, the official reasoning also mentions broader threats like terrorism. Although the summit's final statement omitted specific mentions of other state actors like China or Iran, the wider security spending allocated in the 1.5% portion is designed to address a spectrum of challenges. This includes everything from state-sponsored cyber attacks to disruptions in global supply chains and the resilience of national infrastructure. The plan is an admission that security in the 21st century is a complex, multifaceted issue that requires a comprehensive defense, not just a powerful army. It's about creating a society-wide shield against a range of modern-day threats. Achieving this 5% target will not be easy, and will come with significant economic and social consequences for the member states. The sheer amount of money required is staggering. For a country like Spain, which ultimately opted out of the agreement citing domestic politics, officials estimated that meeting the target would have cost an extra 300 billion euros by 2035. This kind of expenditure cannot simply be created out of thin air. It will require deep and painful cuts to other areas of the national budget. Governments across the alliance will face agonizing choices, likely having to reduce funding for essential public services like healthcare, education, and social welfare programs. Several countries have already begun to signal where this money will come from. The United Kingdom, Belgium, the Netherlands, and France have all announced significant cuts to their foreign aid budgets to help fund their increased military spending. This highlights a major trade-off. Bolstering national defense may come at the expense of international development and humanitarian assistance. Critics argue that this could be counterproductive, as reducing aid could worsen instability in other parts of the world, potentially creating new security challenges down the line. It's a classic guns versus butter debate, but on a scale not seen in decades. The challenge is made even greater by rampant inflation within the defense sector itself. The cost of military hardware is skyrocketing. For example, the price of a single 155mm artillery shell, a crucial munition in modern warfare, has quadrupled since before 2022, now costing over $8,000. Similarly, the price of a modern Leopard 2 main battle tank jumped from $23 million in October 2024 to $30 million by February 2025. This means that even with massive budget increases, countries will be getting less equipment for their money than they would have just a few years ago, making the task of modernizing their armed forces even more expensive and difficult. This spending boom will, however, be a massive windfall for the arms industry. Defense contractors have already seen record revenues, and investment firms like BlackRock have labeled the sector a dynamic growth industry. To meet the incredible demand, the NATO agreement explicitly calls for expanding transatlantic defense industrial cooperation and removing trade barriers. The goal is to create a more efficient and integrated defense market that can produce the vast quantities of equipment needed. However, this raises its own set of questions about the growing influence of the military-industrial complex in national and international policymaking. While the Hague Summit was presented as a moment of ironclad unity, the bold new spending target has not been met with universal approval. The most notable crack in the alliance's consensus came from Spain, which pushed back against the 5% figure and ultimately opted out. This decision, driven by domestic political concerns, raises serious questions about the credibility of the alliance's commitments. If one country can simply refuse to participate, it could weaken the principle of collective responsibility that lies at the heart of NATO. It sets a worrying precedent that other nations facing difficult economic choices might follow in the future. Furthermore, there is a vocal contingent of critics who question the strategic logic behind the 5% figure itself. They point out that NATO's collective military spending already dwarfs that of its primary adversary. In 2024, Russia's entire GDP was around $2 trillion, while the combined GDP of non-US NATO members was $26 trillion. Russia's military budget is roughly 1/10 of what NATO countries already spend. Critics ask if a five-fold increase on a 2% target is a proportional response, or an overreaction that could trigger an even more dangerous arms race. They argue for a smarter, more efficient use of existing resources, rather than a blanket spending increase. The environmental impact of this military expansion is another major point of concern. War and military preparations are incredibly carbon-intensive activities. One report estimated that if NATO countries were to spend 3.5% of their GDP on defense, it would generate an additional 2,330 million metric tons of greenhouse gases by 2030. This runs directly counter to the climate goals that many of these same governments have committed to. It presents a stark conflict between security policy and environmental policy, forcing a difficult conversation about which crisis takes precedence. Ultimately, the decision to aim for 5% spending by 2035 marks a profound turning point for NATO and for global security. It is a clear and unambiguous signal that the era of post-Cold War optimism is over, replaced by a grim acceptance of a more dangerous and confrontational world. This move will fundamentally reshape the economies and societies of member nations, forcing difficult trade-offs and sparking intense debate. While intended to create a stronger and more secure Europe, it also carries the risk of escalating tensions, straining alliance unity, and sacrificing progress in other vital areas. The path to 2035 will be a challenging one indeed.